sick and tired of the high costs and inefficiency plaguing our U.S. healthcare system? Do you feel like you're navigating a maze when dealing with insurance companies, only to end up paying a fortune for basic medical services? Then this Broken Healthcare podcast is for you. So get ready to take control of your healthcare. Here's your host, Ray Kober.
And we're live, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ray Kober. Welcome to Broken Healthcare. I am your host, and I am joined today in studio for the first time ever.
All right.
By Jonathan Wiesen of MediOrbis, and he does so many more things. So welcome to the studio, Jonathan.
Thanks, Ray. It's such a great privilege to be here on the maiden voyage.
Of course. So Jonathan was at the Rangers game last night. Big Rangers win over the Islanders. Tell me about that.
Anytime that we're able to beat the Islanders and beat them handily, it's a very happy day for us Ranger fans.
That's great. He's in his glory. Look at that smile.
Yeah.
You can't hide that.
Yeah.
How did you become a Rangers fan?
Oh, well, it's actually an interesting story, I think, because when I was growing up, hockey was maybe the third or fourth sport in the tri-state area. Most people, baseball, of course, this is the national pastime. Everyone loved the Giants. The Giants of the 80s and early 90s were a dominant force. The Knicks with Patrick Ewing were all over the place. And no one really played much hockey. And I had a good friend who played ice hockey because his father was the starting goaltender of Columbia University's ice hockey team.
Oh, wow.
So just happened to be that one of my friends was a big hockey fan. He was very successful, very good at it, and slowly just got into the sport. And we had a whole group of friends that realized that it was just infinitely better than any of the other sports that were out there. So much more fast, no bias. And I'll be honest, the other part of it is that one of the things that I love about hockey is that your skill is inferior to your grit determination. So the people who are successful in hockey are the ones who try the hardest, who work the hardest, not the ones who are naturally the most talented and the most skills. And as someone who's naturally lacking in athletic skill and capabilities, I had to find a sport where I could be a grinder. And hockey was a perfect fit for me.
Hockey was it.
That was it.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's great. And it's always great when you go to the Garden. The Garden is like electricity. And so Jonathan comes from New Jersey. He was born in New Jersey, and technically born in Manhattan, right? We talked about that, but you grew up in New Jersey. And if you're local and you've ever gone to the Garden, and then you go from the Garden to the Meadowlands and you watch the New Jersey Devils, it's like going from electricity ordained to a funeral.
Right.
Like the fan experience is totally different. And that's not taking anything away from Devils fans. Devils always have a good team, and for many years a much better team than the Rangers, if we're being truthful. But the electricity in the Garden, it's something that you have to experience. And you were in it last night. Who'd you take to the game? Could I ask you that?
So I went with my brother, who's also a big Rangers fan.
Oh, wow.
And he's naturally skilled and gifted. So he could have picked any sport, but I think he chose hockey. Whereas hockey chose me.
Right on. So now, Jonathan is an interesting cat. So you're a medical doctor, a business entrepreneur. You are split in between Israel, where you live with your family, and you spend a lot of time in the U.S. as well. So you're a world traveler, a global leader, we'll call you that. I always like to start with, when did you first figure out that you wanted to be a doctor?
So as the son of a physician, I think I always just assumed that I would be a physician as well, simply because it was familiar and it was comfortable. But I think more than that, seeing someone who is committed to his profession, dedicated to his craft, and really gave 100% of his energy and focus to patients, seeing that firsthand from my father was very inspirational for me. And I thought to myself growing up, hey, why wouldn't I want to do something where you can really help people in a very meaningful and personal way and do something that you really believe in and that you really love? And I actually spent a summer in some financial institution who will remain nameless because my parents wanted me to see different things. Why should I only go into a field? Because that's what I was exposed to and that's what I saw. So they shipped me off one summer to go shadow someone who they knew who worked in one of these big financial firms. And I still remember like it was yesterday. I walk in the first day and everyone's dressed to the T. In the hospital, everyone's wearing pajamas and they're beautiful shirts, ties. The guy who drove me into work with him, and he had an Acura. And I still remember that he had a digital shift, which of course there were no screens in cars, but he had a digital shift. I remember, wow, that's incredible. These guys are so successful. Introduces me to the first guy, and he says, oh, Jonathan is here for the summer. Tell him about your job. And the guy says, oh, I work like a dog, but I make a lot of money. And I said, okay, not necessarily like why I would choose a profession per se, but okay.
Right.
He brings me to the next room, to the next guy. Hey, tell Jonathan about your job, how much you like it. He says, oh, I work really hard, but I make a lot of money. And I say, okay, I'm sensing a pattern here. I think I see what's going on. And you walk through the hospital and people talk about values, ethics, dedication, commitment, helping other people. And here it was just a whole office of people who are working really hard and making a lot of money. And I just knew right then that I never wanted to do something where if someone asked me why I chose to spend the overwhelming majority of my life doing a particular task, it would not be because I was going to make a lot of money. Please God, I want to be successful and support my family.
Right.
But I want to be able to give my kids over the same morals, values, and ethics that I got from my parents, which is commitment to helping other people, doing something that you really believe in. If you're going to spend so much of your time and effort in a profession and in a craft, you want to be able to feel good about it. Again, above and beyond just making a lot of money.
Oh, hell yeah. And it sounds like you do, which is great. So it's a long road to get there, right? I don't think everyone is cut out for medical school or to be a doctor, certainly. I guess it's somewhat by design that they put you through the paces.
Sure.
In terms of all of the school that you have to go through and school residency. By the time all the smoke clears, you're typically, 14 years in?
It's a long road.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a long road. And you managed okay. Did school always come naturally to you? Did you have a choice where your mom and your dad, hey, this is not an option, kid. Like we're gonna chain you to the radiator until you get this.
So actually the opposite. My parents didn't want me to go into medicine. And that's part of why they shipped me off one summer to work in finance. I took some business classes when I was in undergrad. I did English literature for a little while. I taught for a few years.
Oh, wow.
Because I really wanted to see what else was out there and explore different careers. And at the end of the day, just nothing felt as fulfilling as being in medicine. And you're 100% right. So much of what we do in the training, in the undergrad and medical school is actually just a weeding out process. It's almost like the army when you go into basic training. And a lot of what you do is simply just to build up skills and talents and make sure that the people who you're going in with are able and cut out for it. So a lot of that just required you to put your head down and put your all into it and demonstrate the commitment that you need and the dedication that you need. I was blessed to have great role models who taught me what it meant to work hard and to be able to focus and commit to a goal. Actually, back to hockey, when I was in high school, so I played on my school's hockey team, and I was having a conversation with my coach, and I had suggested to him to move someone from offense to defense. And he said to me, Jonathan, if you're going to play defense, you have to be willing to commit to an unspecified goal. On offense, you just want to score, right? On defense, you have to be willing to commit to something without there being a specific metric that's tracking how well you're doing.
Yeah.
You just have to love it and want to do it. And I think it's the same way about medicine. If you're committed, if you want to do it, you'll put in the days, you'll put in the nights, you'll put in the effort. When I was studying for my boards, I had a young kid. My daughter was about 6 months old. I saw her for about an hour a day. That was it, maybe 45 minutes. My wife would bring her to the library. We'd have dinner quickly, and then I'd go back to studying. And that's the commitment to a lifelong passion of helping other people.
Wow. That's impressive. I think often folks don't realize that it's a huge sacrifice. And I don't know how people do it without a support structure, but there certainly are those that just do it and
Sure.
they don't have the underlying support. But just hearing the story, it paints a picture, a young family, your wife, newborn baby. Hey, she needs a little bit of daddy time and your wife comes over and you get that time in when you can. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So now you're in a hospital setting. What was the baptism by fire moment for you where you were like, did you ever have like an oh fuck moment? Like, oh shit, like why did I do this?
Right, every day. Like, are you serious? Just the other day, Friday night, I literally didn't stop to even go to the bathroom until 3 a.m. And you just think to yourself, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to continue doing what I'm doing? And that's part of the commitment to doing your best and putting effort forward. You learn in your training to be able to work as hard as you can, put as much effort as you can into it, and then ask for help when you need it. My brother always used to say that the only thing you need to know in medicine is know what you know and know what you don't know. And that's it. The rest is details.
Right.
And then I always add on to that and like really care very much about what you're doing. If you care what you're doing and know what you know and you don't know, you'll be okay. But you know, you work hard, you have, I'm sure, lots of travel and long hours and times where you're struggling. And I think everyone has those time periods. But if you're doing something that you're passionate about and really care about, it's worth it. And you don't regret that you went into it in the first place, even though there are times where you're thinking, what the heck how am I ever going to get through this? And you just do, right? You just work your way through it.
Sure. I mean, you know, work hard, work often. And if you love what you do, good things will happen. So am I hearing that your brother is an MD as well?
Yeah. He's a gastroenterologist.
Wow. So your family, it really is in the family. Your dad, your brother, anybody else?
My father and brother are the two physicians. I have a sister who's a psychologist and another sister who's a clinical nutritionist.
Oh, wow.
And my youngest brother, who's obviously the smart one and the athletic one, is in pharmaceutical investment and development. So we all found our way around the healthcare profession. Again, like I said, when you grow up in a household where the value is helping other people and there's a real passion and commitment to that, it sort of rubs off on you. It's a little bit infectious.
Interesting. So we talked a little bit and you were telling me that you're spending a good portion of your time, obviously at home with the family in Israel. A good portion of your time is spent here and you're able to work as a physician both there and here. That interests me. Like I'd never really had a conversation with someone where that was the case. Is that hard to manage, or did you think that you could pull that off? Or did you know people that were like, oh yeah, sure, we do it all the time?
Well, a lot of it was forging my own path and doing what I was interested in and what I thought would bring value to myself and to what I was interested in. I still remember actually when I first moved to Israel. So I started work consulting at a pretty large venture capital firm on their medical and scientific development team. So the head of the team sat me down and he said, so what do you want to do? And I said, I'm thinking that I'd like to continue doing clinical work in America because I love critical care and ICU work, and then potentially work in Israel also. And I'd like to continue consulting and advisory work and my telemedicine company. And he said, no, I mean, come on, you can't do that. You have to pick something. And I said, no, I really think like I'm interested in all of these things. And I think you see people who try different things and find their real passion and interest and pursue that particular area. For me, I guess what is a driving force for me is doing interesting, innovative, and creative things. And again, my passion is healthcare. So whether I'm advising companies in the healthcare technology space or advising on the other side, in the investment side, or developing my own products in my company, helping patients in the hospital, it all comes from a place of trying to be innovative and creative in a way that's going to help people and help them bring their health back. One of the things that I love the most in the hospital is when you can think outside the box and you can do things a little bit different than maybe what other people would do or what the standard is, just because you see it a little bit differently or you think that there's something that other people are missing. And I love teaching in the hospital, again, because you have an opportunity to bring something to people who are training, to trainees that you're working with. That's, again, a little bit different than what they are maybe used to or what other people bring to the table. And so obviously work in different contexts, but they all share the same value and they all share that sort of trajectory and that vertical of being creative, helping people in a meaningful way, and being able to bring healthcare to people in a variety of different ways.
Interesting. So I keep saying Israel, and it's like dumb American. I remember growing up as a kid. One of my first gigs as a college kid was I was a bartender, and the money was good. I didn't have to work crazy hours. And a guy who I became very good friends with was from Cyprus. He was Cypriot, and he always used to read like the world news section of the paper.
Right.
No one pays any attention to that here.
No, why would you? Who cares?
And so I feel like a dummy sometimes. Like I consider myself a pretty bright guy, but when it comes to geography, particularly if I've never been to a place, it's hard for me to picture because I haven't been there and I haven't really studied the maps. I mean, obviously everyone knows Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And is that the part of the country that you're from? Give me a sense of how big Israel is. Is it like the size of Rhode Island? Did they recently have the entire country carpeted?
So it's basically the size of New Jersey.
Okay.
And you can drive end to end in a couple of hours. And I think that's what people don't necessarily appreciate, because you read all these stories about all these companies coming out, all this and innovation, venture capital money that's flowing into it. People don't realize it's tiny.
Yeah.
It literally, from a population, from a size standpoint, is about New Jersey. It smells a little bit better, right? We can make fun of New Jersey.
Do they have their
New
own
Yorkers.
version of the New Jersey Turnpike? Because that would be a deal breaker. Yeah, New Jersey.
And part of why actually I was interested in moving there was because I had the exact same mentality that you had. In fact, when I was in high school, my freshman year of high school, we took world history. And one of the questions on the test was just a blank map with countries in Europe. And I not only didn't do well, I was the example that the teacher called me up and said, I'm going to show you the worst student, the guy who knows the least about global.
Did she call you out by name?
Yes, he called me up. He said, show me Turkey, show me Greece,
Oh, God.
show me Italy. And I'm thinking, what do I know? Like, I grew up in New Jersey. I went to Vermont a couple of times. That was like a big trip for us. And I think that part of what's interesting is just seeing different perspectives, different culture. Now, Dubai is a 3-hour flight for me. It's like going to Miami.
That's crazy.
And you see like a whole new country and a new culture. And so that's actually something that I really appreciate being there, that it's much more global. I always go back to that famous cartoon in the New Yorker, how a New York person sees the world. And there's New York and California, and then like a few small cities in between. It's 100% true.
Yeah, it's definitely, we got to get the chip off of our shoulder. So tell me what it's like. So are you in Jerusalem? Where are you?
Just south of Jerusalem.
Just south of Jerusalem. What the hell is it like living over there? Because I think that's the other piece of it. I've talked to people that are there and they're like, hey, it's as normal gets.
Yeah.
Its own normal though, because it's not really normal, right? You're living in a country that literally is at war. And how is it?
Yeah, I think we live in an age where there's such an overwhelming media and social media presence that it moves into reality, and people now associate what you see on a screen with what must be happening on the ground. Now, that was probably always true, but I think even more so now. If you're on your phone 4 or 5 hours a day looking through Instagram and TikTok, and it gets ingrained in your mind and you really believe that's the reality. And so everything that you said is correct, that if you drive around, you won't notice anything different. Drive around Jerusalem, you can go to the holy sites, you can go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you can go to the Church of the Nativity, you can go to Mount Olives, visit all of them, and you'll think everything is completely normal. And then you'll realize things are not exactly normal. So a big part of a culture's ability to persevere and to have grit is to be able to continue status quo and to be able to continue doing what you're doing even under difficult circumstances. Same way, if you're working and you have something personal going on in the background, you have to be able to continue to push through and to be able to accomplish the task at hand, as challenging as it may be emotionally. And I think it's something very similar. There's been an incredible investment in Israeli technology. There's been a big push for Israeli investment. There are stories almost every day of soldiers on the front lines signing term sheets with venture capital firms and companies exiting and raising money despite all the hardships. So it's like most things, there are challenges, and you either rise up to the challenge and succeed, or you back down. And come on, we're not the type of guys who are going to back down.
Hell no. No. So paint a picture for me. You're in the ER or the ICU over there doing what you do, and alarms go off. I would imagine you have sirens that sound if there's a potential raid or bombing. Have you been in that setting before?
So where we are in the center of the country, not as often. So it happens in areas in the far north of the country, right under Syria and Lebanon. and the far south of the southern area of the country near the Gaza envelope a lot more often. But I will share that one thing that's very interesting is that there are national commemoration sirens that go off. So on Holocaust Memorial Day, for example, there's a siren that goes off for a full minute, and basically the entire country comes to a halting stop. The highways, the major highways, every car comes to a stop. And I've been with patients when the siren goes off, and literally mid-sentence, you just stop, you stand up, you come to attention. There's a minute of commemoration, and then you resume what you were doing.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
Right,
It's not the same. So there are those moments for sure.
Yeah. And do you have anxiety about your kids are still kind of just coming up, right? I think your oldest is 17, you
Yeah.
said. So, but I'm sure you must have family, friends that have members of their family and friends that are closer to where all the action is.
Yeah.
Does it just become a way of life and a normal, or is there a lot of PTSD, a lot of people walking around just like waiting for the bomb to drop? But what's it like?
Yeah. Yes to all the above. You have a lot of people who are impacted and a lot of people who are affected. After October 7th, a lot of my friends and colleagues, my former co-fellows actually reached out to me and said, how are things going? How are things over there? And I told them that, quite frankly and very honestly, that it's very challenging. It is. But the way that we've responded to these challenging situations and circumstances is by binding together, by supporting each other, by helping each other in whatever shape that looks like. I think that most people, the overwhelming majority of people, just want peace, want to live in harmony with everyone around us. We want to be able to get to a point where terrorists can't just impose their will on innocent civilians, just like we've had many conversations about 9/11 and what that was like. That was an unfortunate situation where the United States allowed itself to be the victim of a terror attack. And that got in the way of what was peace, right? On 9/10, we had peace.
Yeah.
And so the intention is for us to be able to get to that place where we can continue working in healthcare and developing and innovating as a team in partnership, rather than being beholden to the radical terrorists that are unfortunately these days imposing their will on innocents.
Are you optimistic? Do you think we're going to get there? And I guess it's easy to be jaded when there's been so much tension and conflict for so many years now, decades and decades, maybe even longer than that. It goes way back. And at some point you have to say, at least I think, give me a break. Honestly, believe me, I get that there are folks out there that are going to be like, fuck you, Ray. It's not your brother. It's not your sister. It's not your father. And you could say that on both sides, right? But eventually there comes a point where we just have to get along and get past it. And for someone that lives there and that's part of the culture, and look, you're a generation at least behind me. I'm being kind to myself. Do you feel that with the next generation comes a sense of optimism and hope that you can get to a place where, hey, time does move on? And I don't know what you think about technology, if that plays a role and is throwing fuel on the fire, or there's an opportunity for good. But what's your sense of what's to come?
Yeah, I'm an optimistic person in general. I always think that there's hope. I always think that there's opportunity. I always joke that I grew up learning history from a super liberal hippie history professor in high school. He was part of those like left-wing demonstrations. He showed us.
Couldn't he show you a map?
Yeah, that was before. This is U.S. history. And by the way, he did show us a map of all the buildings they were planning on blowing up in Washington.
Oh, great.
So he was that radical. And so I grew up with progressive values and the hope and optimism that every culture could reach a utopia. And that's just my personality. And I do believe it. And I think that technology has, unfortunately, all over the world, radicalized people. With artificial intelligence and real fake news, unfortunately, that's only going to be accelerated. And at the same time, I think the overwhelming majority of people want peace. Most people, and I've seen it, I've experienced it. We talked about how social media has become, in most people's eyes, reality. The reality is not that most people want war. The reality is that the overwhelming majority of people want to just live side by side and live in peace and be able to have their families and have their jobs and not have terrorists attacking and not have terrorists running their societies.
Mm.
So I'm optimistic that it'll happen. I do think that it requires an investment, and it requires people to sometimes make difficult decisions, controversial decisions, whatever they are. It's not easy. People always talk about having to fight for peace. It's really true. Everything that's valuable in life requires investment and requires hard work and sacrifice. And there's hard work and sacrifice that must be made in order to have peace. And that's a sacrifice in many different areas, socially, economically, potentially in terms of the geopolitical status, whatever it is, you just have to be willing to fight for it. And there have to be two parties who are willing to come to the table and to make peace. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get there. I do firmly believe that the people who have a stated goal of not bringing peace, they're probably not the people who are going to be bringing it. But all the rest of the people definitely want it.
Right, right. Awesome. I share your optimism. I think it's high time. It's time that we stabilize that region. Ever since I'm a kid growing up in the 70s, that region has been unstable. And it would be great to see some unity there and kind of peace once and for all. I think that would be the ultimate. So what is the view of America to the world today? And I ask you this, so we're recording this a day before the election in the US. And it's funny, I'm of the mind that we're at a tipping point, but I don't recall a time in my life where there's been so much vitriol and just contention, blue versus red, left versus right. And there's a lot of rhetoric out there. I think one of the big problems that we face today is that media is so powerful. And I was a communications major at St. John's, and the FCC had rules that you couldn't have any one entity own. First, it was the rule of sevens, the rule of 12s. It went back, I forget it precisely. But the idea was no one organization or conglomerate can own multiple newspaper, television network, et cetera, because they would wield too much power. And they've dispensed with those rules long ago.
Right.
And I believe we're in a worse position now than we ever have, because it's almost like social media has really fanned the flames of that fire.
Yeah.
And I am all for freedom and free speech. I think any form of censorship is certainly not what I stand for, and I don't think it's what the United States of America stands for. But ultimately, I believe if you're left-leaning, the media spoon feeds you left. If you're right-leaning, the media spoon feeds you right. So either way, you're getting a disproportionate amount of, you're only getting one side of the story.
Right.
And I do feel that our media here in the US is corrupt. And so getting to point, I often hear that, oh, America once was the pinnacle. They were revered in all parts of the world. It was the gold standard, if you will.
Right.
And now we're a laughing stock. And you'll hear the left say that about Trump, and they compare him to a dictator. And you hear the right say, well, it was Biden and he's incompetent. And maybe even it predates those folks. And I know that we're only talking about one little microcosm, but I'm just curious, at the bar, at the dinner table, at the coffee shop, what do you hear? How do the folks, in your opinion, based on what you hear, how do they view America right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's very challenging because the world has so many moving pieces at the same time so quickly that it's very hard to pin down specific instances, feelings. You could literally be on the top of the world and then be in the bottom the next day, or even the next hour. It's that things change that dramatically and that quickly. I love Jerry Seinfeld's commentary. I think that he has an incredible way of being hilarious and insightful at the same time. And one thing that he said recently in one of his interviews was, he said the whole idea of political parties makes no sense to him. The idea that there's going to be one group of people that all agree 100% on all of these issues is insane. And I think he's 100% right. That I think that because you have to define yourself by a certain party and by certain institutions, you're beholden to them. Whereas if you just take a step back, and again, then maybe this is my optimism speaking, I think the overwhelming majority of people in the United States, by and large, agree with most things. They may differ in terms of the extent or the intensity. They may differ in terms of how to implement it. But overall, most people in America believe in free speech. I don't think you'll have a lot of people on your podcast that will say, no, we have to control the narrative, right? And
wouldn't be a very good show.
I know every show would be the same because it would all be controlled. And most people believe in healthcare and making sure that you can help people in different ways. Again, the extent, the duration, the intensity, the manner in which you do it is a little bit different. But overall, most people agree with most values. But the need to define yourself has made it very challenging. And like you said, once you have social media algorithms that are inherently there to link you in and to addict you to what they're feeding you, they're only going to feed you the stuff that they know you're going to love. And I don't know what the right answer is in terms of how we can continue finding that commonality, which I really do believe is the overwhelming majority of people with the overwhelming majority of issues. And rather than continuing the bifurcation that everyone's been talking about for a long time and that you see more often. The only other comment I'll mention is that having watched a lot of political debates over the years, there was a strong emphasis in the past of people saying that they reached across the aisle, that they could work with people on the other team. I remember John McCain saying that over and over again. I've been in the Senate for so many years, and I always used to reach across the aisle, and I could work with anyone from any party. And I always thought that was really impressive, that he was someone, and again, I'm not necessarily here advocating John McCain.
This is not a political show, folks.
No, it's not. And then I remember in the debates that the question was, who would be more successful at working with the other party? And that was a big issue. Who would be able to compromise? You don't have those conversations now. In the political discussions and debates that I'm seeing, no one is getting up there and saying, I'm going to be able to reach across the aisle and I'm going to be able to compromise and I'm going to be able to get stuff done because I can be flexible. You see the other side. I'm going to stamp on the other people and I'm going to make sure that we push through whatever agenda we have. And I think, unfortunately, that's indicative of where we've gotten to.
Yeah, for sure. There's, again, just a lot of rhetoric, a lot of venom, a lot of hate speech, for lack of a better word. And it really has deteriorated, in my opinion, the golden age in this country. And I think fondly, this is before your time, but back on the 70s. And it was just an incredible period of time. And you could point to a lot of things that were wrong in the 1970s in the US. But I think there was more mutual respect. And even to this day, if you're a fan of and you vote for Kamala, great. If you're a fan of and you vote for Trump, great. But it's not great anymore. People are very volatile and very opinionated. If you're not with them, then you're against them. And like, how do we get there? Like, give me a break. You're entitled to your opinion. Who do you think is going to be best to lead the country? And I think we also get caught up in the media hype, and it's not, at least for me, it's not as cut and dry as who the president is. Right. There's a whole party behind the president. And it's a matter of, do you think we're better off than we were 4, 8, 12 years ago? And what can we do moving forward to get better? And who's best positioned, what party, what president, but collectively is going to get us there? And it's not an easy question for sure. And there are so many different facets to it, but it piques my curiosity because I often hear that we're the laughing stock of France and Italy and Europe is laughing at us and blah, blah, blah. And how much of that is hype and how much of it is real? And I do feel like if you read Ray Dalio's recent book, and he's a student of history and he talks about the rise and fall of empires, I do think if you look at it pragmatically, the US is on the downslope and China is on the upslope, if we're just kind of using those two countries as an example. But I also think that we're at a much different time in history. And particularly with technology, and you mentioned Israel and Israel's success in technology, and certainly some amazing technological innovation has come out of Israel. I feel like the US, it's still one place where we shine and dominate. With now the dawn of AI and us now talking about AI being a game changer, I think about it and I say, well, maybe we were on the downslope. Maybe we need to pull up another screen to look at this chart a little further. I think there's an opportunity there. But getting back on point, what is it like practicing medicine in a hospital in Israel versus the US? Is it the same? Is it completely different? Do you leave one setting and say, oh, I don't want to go there? Or is your job virtually unchanged?
So it's radically different, and I love it. I think it's great because you're exposed to variety and you can learn from different systems and identify the components to each one that you think brings value and is inherently important. My mother told me once that when she was dating, she went on a whole bunch of bad dates. But she always said to herself, listen, even if I don't like this guy, even if he brings nothing to the table and I'm never going to see him again, let me at least use this as an opportunity to find something interesting, to learn something. I'm here anyway, right? I'm going to get my steak. Maybe I should also learn something or get something out of it. I thought that was such a great attitude and perspective. And as a general principle, I subscribe to it wholly, in that when you're practicing in the United States, there are certain things that are available to you. There are certain resources that you have that you're not going to get anywhere in the world. I worked for 6 years at the Cleveland Clinic. I could snap my fingers and get a same-day echocardiogram. I could get a same-day consultation with a specialist. I could get any laboratory test, imaging study that I wanted. It was incredible. It was amazing. But they have the resources to be able to do it. It's a resource-rich environment. I've worked in free clinics. I've worked in rural clinics where it's just you and your stethoscope and maybe a fridge with a couple of medications.
Right.
So
right.
it's a completely different environment. Each one of them brings different interesting modalities and different things that are important and that are worthwhile. I have a very good friend who worked in Greece taking care of some of the immigrants who came over during the Syrian civil war. And he was telling me how he had a stethoscope and a couple of cabinets of medication. And he all of a sudden had to go back to the basics of fundamental medicine. Now, if you asked me, would I pick that as an area to get my care? The answer would be, of course not. But if as a practitioner, there's certainly certain inherent skills that you learned in medical school, things where if you're ordering x-rays and echoes and CAT scans left and right, you may not pay as close attention to, but in that setting, in that environment, all of a sudden your physical examination is integral. And so you can learn from it and you could take out the components of each and every one of those environments that's important. And I think also for my role at MediOrbis and telemedicine and understanding the US healthcare system, having the exposure to a completely different healthcare system and understanding sort of the rubric of how systems are built helps me understand what is going on in the United States and the different permutations, options, and the different varieties of health plans that you can get here. Because I've seen international healthcare and I understand it at least a little bit. And now I can take that infrastructure and then I can apply it to the United States and say, okay, this plan is similar to that one. And this other plan is not similar at all. And PPO, HMO, all of those different constructs, mech plans, mini meds, those are all unique. And I think having a broader perspective on different ways in which health plans are created and different countries, different geographies, different demographics in which they're implemented has given me a really interesting background in terms of where healthcare is delivered and how it's delivered in those different regions.
Yeah, for sure. So how does it work in Israel? Is it national healthcare or is it more similar to what we have here in the US?
So it's government mandated healthcare. So all of the healthcare is delivered through private clinics or private insurance companies, HMOs, but it's a law that you have to have healthcare. So again, it's a little bit different than the United States, where you have a lot of government-sponsored healthcare, and then you have a lot of privately sponsored healthcare. You don't really have government-mandated private healthcare.
Huh.
Well, I think the Affordable Care Act tried pushing that part of the US healthcare system that wasn't there before. But before that, it didn't really exist. Whereas Israel, the entire country is built on that. And I think a lot of places in Europe have very similarly constructed plans.
So is it privatized then? Are you paying out of pocket for healthcare, or is
Yeah.
it part of the tax structure, or
Yeah, every month you have to pay for your healthcare.
you have to pay for your
It's, of
healthcare?
course, a fraction of what it is in the United States.
Right.
Again, pros and cons. So,
Well, put that into perspective for us. Depending upon where you are in the US, it's going to vary wildly. And I joke, but it's not a joke. I know what the numbers are. And in some parts of the country, you can get a decent healthcare plan for around $10,000 or maybe under $10,000. Very tough to do in the New York metropolitan area where we are now. And as a family, you can buy a family plan on the New York State Exchange. If you want the best, lowest copay, lowest deductible through United Healthcare, you're going to pay in the ballpark of $70,000 a year
crazy. Yeah.
for a health insurance plan.
Yeah.
Is it anything like that there?
Not even close. Not even like in the same ballpark. And if you get the top plan for your family, you're paying a fraction of what you would in the United States. It's a two-tiered system, though, because a lot of people will get supplemental insurance on top of their regular government mandated insurance, so that you have access to quicker care delivery, so that you have access to specialists in a more timely fashion, which you don't necessarily get through the typical health plans. So the United States has shied away from a two-tiered system. I'm not judging, I'm simply observing. And many countries in Europe have embraced it. And so it's a completely different infrastructure. And again, so we do international telemedicine. We have IPMI clients. Now I know what that means because I have IPMI.
Okay.
Whereas when I was in the United States.
Well, for the rest of us, what is IPMI?
Oh, it's basically a private international insurance. So an international plan within your typically provided insurance. If you have Aetna or United, you may have an international component already built in, but you're paying $10,000 a year or $70,000 a year. Whereas because in Europe and in the Middle East, the plan is so much more affordable, it also offers less coverage. So people will buy that supplemental coverage to cover them internationally. Now I know what it is because I had to buy one for my family.
And so just for shits and giggles, what does family coverage cost for something like that? Just that component?
Not terribly expensive. Again, just throwing out numbers, I'd say if to get coverage for my whole family for being in the United States for the whole summer, and that may have included extreme sports or something, you know? So, which was an extra $100, $150. It's not very expensive.
Gotcha. And it's a pretty good safety net. In other words, you're not terribly exposed if, God forbid, something catastrophic happened.
Right. Exactly. And again, it's very interesting for me as someone who likes thinking and understanding and dissecting, maybe a little too much. It's nice to understand how different systems are constructed and understanding the pros and cons of how different systems work. I'm sure you all day are talking to your clients and putting together different components and different facets of plans because you really understand the back end of how these things work. And you can then advise a group, an employer, a family, okay, this is what your value is, and these are the plans that are out there. This is what I would recommend, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things that I think I enjoy the most about what I do is it requires thought. You have to look at the geography, you have to look at the group, you have to discuss what's most important to them. And the idea ultimately, and I think where Benefixa shines in what I do in my day job when I'm not having fun in front of a camera and talking to folks like you, it's deconstructing a traditional health plan and then building it from the ground up with the aim and the objective of making healthcare better, which always is in the spotlight for the members, but then simultaneously reducing costs for the group. And what I really love is reducing costs for plan members with the goal ultimately of giving them a path to $0 out of pocket, which is super important when we're in a country now that has staggeringly over 100 million Americans have medical debt, which is just a crazy crazy statistic. This episode of Broken Healthcare Podcast is brought to you by Benefixa Healthcare Consultants. Visit benefixa.com to learn what's possible. Reduce the cost of healthcare for your organization, deliver better outcomes for your people, and yes, design health plans that give your people a path to $0 out-of-pocket costs for healthcare. Visit benefixa.com today. So now, before I get to MediOrbis, which I definitely want to dive into, in terms of the experience in a traditional healthcare setting, for me to get an appointment with my primary care physician, it could take me as much as 6 months or longer to get an appointment to see my primary care physician.
Sure.
And that's paying tens of thousands of dollars a year for coverage. How does that look in Israel? And is that dependent upon that buying up feature that you talk about? Because I think lots of folks who are ignorant, and I'm not trying to abuse anyone by using that term, will point to like Canada and say, oh yeah, sure, if you break your arm, it takes you 3 years to get your arm set, which I don't believe is the case.
Right.
But I certainly believe that it does take much longer for them to have access to care than you would necessarily in the US. Is it similar in Israel, or how does it work?
Yeah, so there are pros and cons to every system, and every system is set up differently. One of the things that I've appreciated about the European style system is that it has a focus on primary care as opposed to specialty care, whereas the United States has typically, through higher reimbursement and CPT codes, incentivized specialty care procedures and interventions. Now, again, I have my own opinions as to which makes the most sense from a population standpoint. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm just observing that they're very different and they have completely different values. If you're incentivizing primary care and de-incentivizing specialty care, so then you'll get the opposite of what you have in the United States. Primary care is readily available. You can get an appointment pretty quickly. You could be seen by a doctor pretty quickly for primary care. Whereas, like you said, if you break your arm in Canada, according to your friends, it'll take quite some time to get your arm fixed because that's specialty care. Whereas in the United States, they have an outstanding infrastructure for complex cases, for complex specialty care. And you have to wait 6 months to see your primary care doctor.
Yeah.
So I will mention that in general, I'm not someone who necessarily buys into big picture ideas as much as I buy into the way in which individuals implement them. I studied literature in undergrad, and I took a course in postmodern literature where the phrase in postmodern literature is an incredulity towards meta-narratives. In other words, all of these big picture ideas sound great on paper, but they're always implemented by people, and people are fallible. Is capitalism the panacea and socialism is horrible? Not necessarily. It just depends whether good people are working in both systems. You could have a completely corrupt capitalistic society and a great socialistic society, or the other way around. And people will be miserable simply based on the way in which they're implemented. So I think that there's what to say about all the different systems. But at the end of the day, it just depends on whether you can access good people and whether there are people with the best interest of the population at hand who are implementing them.
Check out Dr. Wiesen, Renaissance man, English literature. So what I got out of that is don't believe everything you hear, don't believe everything you read, don't believe everything you see. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
We could wrap up now.
Interesting. So shift gears with me and tell me how you go from medicine to entrepreneurship. Have you always been an entrepreneur? Do you believe it's always, were you the kid selling lemonade out on the front, or was it always in your blood? Was it instilled in you? Are entrepreneurs born, or are they made?
It's a great question. I think that a little bit of both. I have friends who are real entrepreneurs. The guy, I'm thinking of one of my good friends who now runs company, private equity backed, buying up companies and rolling them up and merging them together. He used to run the vending machines in high school, and he was out selling t-shirts on the street, and he was always a wheeler and dealer, and that was his personality. I always was looking for interesting things to do rather than necessarily looking for good business opportunities. So when I was in medical school, I did 6 months of research because it just seemed really interesting. I wanted to get down and really understand one particular area of medicine. And so I did 6 months of infectious disease research with a great mentor. It was a great experience. When I was in residency, I love teaching, I love researching, I love understanding things. And so I always tried to explore a little bit more. The feeling I got was that a lot of people take things at face value. And I liked sort of understanding a little bit more, again, that incredulity towards meta narratives, not taking everything as it's presented to you and digging a little bit deeper and understanding more. And that always led me towards doing different things. I got a teaching degree when I was a resident because I thought it was like really cool to learn how to present information and how to teach medical residents and medical students. I got a teaching degree when I was a fellow also because it was just always really important for me to explore the process with the people who I worked with. And coming to telemedicine was simply the result of looking at what was out there and exploring what options were there in the marketplace. We were just starting when I was finishing my fellowship to learn about tele-ICU. And I remember as if it was yesterday with two of my colleagues sitting down in the Starbucks in the G building at the Cleveland Clinic and saying, hey, if you could take care of the sickest patients in the hospital with telemedicine, there's probably a good way to use technology to bring healthcare to people in a new, interesting, and innovative way if you can already do it to the sickest people in the hospital. And that's really where MediOrbis came from. It was just simply a desire to explore how we can think about things a little bit differently, how we can bring care to people using technology in a way that other people weren't. And that's why when we first started, there were companies out there, only one particular thing at a time. You could either do just acute care, urgent care, or you could only do behavioral mental health, or you could only do medical second opinions. And I always thought, listen, I'm a doctor. I'll do anything. I'd have clinic and I'd take care of patients' primary care needs. I'd take care of their specialty care needs. I'd give them second opinions. Wouldn't it make sense to have a healthcare technology company that could do all of those? And that's really where MediOrbis emerged from.
Huh. So was it your thought? Did you come up with the idea? Do you have partners? Are you private equity backed? Are you bootstrapping this and funding it on your own? Talk to me.
Yeah, so we are not private equity backed. We have no institutional investors. Myself and my partner bootstrapped the entire operation and have grown organically. Again, part of what I like to say is that I've done advisory work. I've worked in the venture capital side of things. So I know what you're supposed to do, and we do the opposite. We haven't sought institutional investment. We've grown organically, but slowly. And I think we were talking earlier when you said you have to look at what you want to accomplish and what you want to do, and then set a path to get there. And there were a lot of people who they're setting a path to $100 million exit or $1 billion exit or a $10 billion exit. We really wanted to build a meaningful healthcare technology company that would help people and would be able to bring interesting and innovative care delivery modalities to people who didn't have access to it. So I didn't need to go out and raise $100 million because I needed to get to $1 billion valuation. I wanted to build an interesting, innovative company, and my partner shares the same perspective. To the extent that I can tell you we've saved people's lives, we've been successful.
Yeah, that's cool. And that kind of begs the next question. And you touched on it, but what problem do you solve? And how is it better now to have MediOrbis in the marketplace? Like the first company that I knew of that really came on my radar that did telemedicine was Teladoc. And part of what I do is I manage my own investments. And so I follow the markets. And I know that Kathy Wood of ARK Investments is a huge fan of Teladoc, and being in the space and seeing that there are so many solutions out there. Teladoc hasn't had the greatest run in terms of the price of the stock. I mean, I guess it all depends on what your entry and exit points were. But I remember being in a room with the founder of Teladoc, and I asked them, I said, when is the stock going to go up? Like, what's going on? And he was very candid, and he had a great answer for me, but which is not the point. I look at telemedicine and I say, it just makes so much sense to me. I think there's something to be said about, let me just do a reality check for a second. Is the stethoscope the first thing you get when you're a doctor?
The white coat.
The white coat, white coat, stethoscope. But the stethoscope, doctors walk around with them. It's kind of like the association. Is that the one instrument that's the most important instrument as a medical doctor?
every instrument is the most important instrument. When I teach residents and medical students and fellows, I tell them that your taking care of a patient starts the second you have any exposure, whether you open the chart or whether they walk into the room or whether you first lay eyes on them. That's when you start taking care of someone. And every single other part of the equation is simply a tool to help you take care of a patient. So the stethoscope is essential in certain ways, and it's also unnecessary for other things. If you're doing open heart surgery, you probably don't need a stethoscope, right? But
Yeah.
you probably need a scalpel.
Right.
So there are many different tools at your disposal. And that's also part of what we were getting at before with different resources and different regions. You'll have different tools at your disposal. I think that telemedicine is essential and essential to integrate into the care modality. It's so convenient. It's so easy. You can meet patients where they are, which is the most important thing. And then more than that, you can also change the paradigm of care. So I mentioned my father, who's an endocrinologist. He's one of the top rated endocrinologists in New Jersey. Every single year, he's a top doctor and he's outstanding. I can brag, right? But now we're starting to think broadly of how do we engage members? How do we engage patients? How do we take care of them 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? What tools can we bring? What team members can we bring to help them out? So we do longitudinal care, medical weight loss, chronic disease management. That's predicated upon having a comprehensive care team that takes care of patients and takes care of members and does it with different tools and in different manner than the typical traditional medicine. So again, going back to the different tools in your toolbox,
Right.
if you're only using one tool, you're not going to be successful all the time.
Right.
But if you have many different tools and you choose which are the most appropriate ones, then your likelihood of success is much higher. And so that's why we've tried to change the paradigm of how we're taking care of patients. If it's an expert medical opinion, someone who has a complex case, so you're going to need a specialist to spend hours pouring through charts and reviewing literature to come at the right conclusion. Whereas if you have someone traveling to Mexico and they have a stomach bug or they have a sinus infection, so you need a Mexican doctor who can take care of them in a couple of minutes to be able to get them the medications they need. One size does not fit all. And every single circumstance has its own, I think, best fit in terms of taking care of people.
Yeah, brilliant. So obviously you're a smart guy. I know where I was going with this, right? I do think that there's something to be said for putting your hands on a patient and using some of the traditional tools. However, that said, there are so many applications where, to your point, it's just not necessary. These tools are important. They are useful, but it really depends on the patient and on what's going on. And
Yeah.
so where do you see Orbis shining? What problem did you set out to solve? Where is the greatest impact for good? And how do you deal with, okay, we need to transition this patient now from our team or virtual to get them to a brick and mortar setting? How does that handoff take place and what happens there?
It's all about integrated care. When people would ask me years ago, was the Cleveland Clinic really as good as people say? I would always tell them, listen, you can find good physicians in a lot of different healthcare systems, but the best thing that the Cleveland Clinic has is an integrated care delivery platform. And it started with the electronic medical records, which they adopted very early on, and had an infrastructure set up where different specialists would commingle and would discuss complex cases. And so that to me was invaluable. And so the value that we bring is an integrated care delivery platform for an entire population. You may have a group of people that never want to see a doctor unless they're sick, right? Everyone in the conferences that you go to in the healthcare ecosystem always denigrates sick care. Sick care is important too. It's also healthcare, but it's also sick care, right? If you have a sinus infection, you want someone to take care of you. And then there are people who really want to get healthy and well, so you need to be able to provide primary care. There may be people who are struggling with chronic medical conditions, so you have to provide longitudinal care. Unfortunately, nowadays, there's just a study that came out, the rates of breast cancer have gone up considerably over the last 10 years. You need specialty care also. So a population is complex, it's multifaceted, and you need to be able to bring a platform that can bring all the different services to people who need them in all the different modalities. Someone may be struggling with mental health. you need a platform that can provide that for them. Someone maybe just needs a medication refill, you should be able to provide that as well. And that's really what we set out to achieve, to be able to bring that whole health ecosystem in one platform, one access point to these broad populations.
And so give me an idea. What is your go-to-market strategy? How do you interface with, is it a traditional healthcare system? Are you trying to replace Oxford? Are you trying to supplement them? Are you working more or less is the focus talking about in the US, employer and organizations that have self-funded plans, and they are more focused on delivering higher value, higher quality care, reducing costs? Are you best in that environment? Is it all the above? And what is your go-to-market strategy?
Sure. What's very important for us is to emphasize that we're not trying to replace anyone or anything. We're trying to help. We're trying to take care of patients. We're trying to bring a good user experience to members who have access to our service. To the extent that we can work in harmony with other pre-existing plans or providers, to the extent that we're valuable, we would love to provide that service. We never want to step on anyone's toes. And we never want to come in and have the attitude that we're better than anyone else or some other service that other people have. And so we have found a lot of success being able to bring this variety and diversity of clinical services to populations that may be underserved. So we work with rural and critical access populations that may not be underserved because they don't have access, but may simply not be available. So employers that are really busy that need to be able to get their care quickly, so we can provide that. And diversity and simplicity. So knowing that you have one access point to be able to get a counselor if you're struggling with anxiety or adjustment disorders, or someone who you can go to if you want to get healthy or you need a plan for medical weight loss. That's the value that we bring to these populations and to the different folks that we work with. The clients that we have are so diverse because as a provider, we work with diverse people. We can work with primary care providers, and we can provide specialty, longitudinal, and mental health care. We can work with employer groups because we can provide the entire spectrum of services that their members may need. We've worked with, in the over 65, traditional Medicare Advantage, because all of them can benefit from great clinical services.
Very interesting. And so how do you price something like this? And what type of analysis went into, like, just to answer that question, like, hey, what the hell would we charge for something like this? And then in my business mind, I think about, well, how do they deal with scaling? Like, if all of a sudden they have an enterprise organization that comes along and they have 50,000 employees, and on average it's 2.7 members per employee, they could have 80,000 members on the plan. Are you prepared for that? How do you deal with that?
So what's amazing about digital health and telehealth is it's inherently scalable. It's inherently built to be able to allow growth when you need it, and then contraction when you don't need it. My partner is an MBA from NYU and is a black belt in operations for the University of Michigan. And this system is constructed specifically for healthcare ecosystems that are flexible. With a traditional staffing model in let's say a rural or critical access hospital, you would need to pay a cardiologist to be on call every single day, whether there's work or not.
Yep.
And here you can aggregate populations, health systems, members all together, and then grow when the need arises and contract when the need arises. We brought on 50,000 member groups with very short notice. None of our metrics change at all because we have an incredibly flexible system with tons of bandwidth. And again, part of it is that, thank God, my partner is great and we've put together a great system. But a lot of it also is that the system is inherently supposed to be flexible, as opposed to the inelastic healthcare system that we've been working with for so many years.
Interesting. So did we actually, over the course of maybe pre-COVID, how long has Teladoc been around?
A long time.
A long time. It's been around a long time. But I almost feel like now, since telemedicine has become so much more mainstream, we've a new economy has been created, right? I would imagine that you have medical professionals like yourselves that are now focusing on remote care
Mhm.
as a vocation, as a profession, as opposed to the traditional healthcare setting. Is that true?
And to their credit, the pioneers in telemedicine, the Teledocs and Amwells of the world, have been saying this for years, that telemedicine is going to be part of medicine. And it really is. My 90-year-old grandmother, may she rest in peace, her last year, she had CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And we needed advice from a specialist as to how to take care of her. She had a telehealth encounter with with a hematologist who
Wow.
specialized in CLL at 96 years old. And so that was part of the ecosystem. And I think that's going back to what you asked before. The companies that are out there saying, we're going to replace this or we're going to get rid of that, I can't get behind that, because I think it needs to be a narrative around integrating with different care systems and integrating into health systems and integrating into different health plans to be able to provide what you can. The modularity of the services that we provide, from specialty to behavioral health to medical weight loss, again, are inherently flexible, so we can provide the services that are necessary to the populations where it's necessary. We're not going to go out and say, hey, one size fits all, right? You got to have different tools in your toolkit in order to be successful.
So, is there innovation then on the MediOrbis front? It sounds to me like you're not doing simply sick care visits. It sounds to me like you're not just doing physical medicine, you're doing mental health as well. Do you have a differentiator? Is there an area that you broke ground in, you were the first to do it? Or are you simply saying, hey, we see the need for this, we want to be a part of this, we think we could do it better than anyone? What is your
So there are a couple of differentiators. The first is that we're a clinician driven organization. So I can speak to the doctors who work with us in the language that they understand.
Mm,
I review the clinical notes. I review the service levels and the SLAs and KPIs. And so it's different, I think, from a lot of other companies that may not have that clinical leadership and can get behind it in the way that I feel comfortable saying. I know almost all of the clinical protocols that we have, the clinical parameters, the clinical services. I know a lot of the providers. That's what we do. We're a physician-driven organization.
mm.
That's already, I think, a different ballgame than a lot of the other companies that are out there. And like I said, from our inception, we understood that healthcare is broad, and the care that we're delivering has to be accessible and valuable to a broad spectrum of individuals. And so that's why, even from our inception, we were working with a variety of different clients, from rural and critical access areas to dense geographic regions, to employers in New York, because as clinicians, you're able to deliver care to whoever needs services, and you're able to help people in whatever context, with whatever tools, whatever modalities are available to you.
Mm.
And that was how we were founded. That was our value proposition then, and we still maintain adherence to it now.
Very cool. So I'll use myself as an example. Getting back to, I'm in a traditional healthcare plan. I want to make an appointment with my primary care physician. It's 6 months out, and it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. So do I think of and say, oh, you know what? I remember this at open enrollment. They talked about this. Maybe I could set an appointment with a MediOrbis doc, have him write a prescription for blood work, and then do a follow-up there. Is that something that you do, or is it more acute care? I'm going to call MediOrbis when my toddler wakes up screaming at 3 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Eve, when there's not a doctor, urgent care clinic, or anything to be found. And I know damn well the kid's got an ear infection. I just need a script to get this kid some antibiotics to give him some relief. Do I think about MediOrbis then? Or do I say, you know what? I had a really stressful day, and this is the 32nd day of this month. I need a mental health visit. Is it all the above? That's a multiple choice question for you.
Right. So the value in telehealth and digital health is being able to provide the services that the members need, whether it's primary care being there to be able to order and analyze blood work, to being able to help them with their health and wellness, weight loss, chronic medical disease condition, specialty care condition, or just being available 24/7. It's basically what you would put together if you could put together the plan that would be ideal. How would you want to access your physicians? When would you want to access them? When would you be able to provide and get those services? And that's what we've tried to put together. So you call at 2 a.m. and you need a script for your kid who has an ear infection, we can do that. And I think, and if you want to sign up for one of our longitudinal care programs, it would be our pleasure. And if you had your primary care doctor who you were going to see in 6 months, we'd be happy to work hand in hand with your provider to make sure that we're taking care of you in the best way. It may be more convenient for you to come to us and then also send it to your primary care doctor. We have outstanding outcomes from a diabetes management program where some of the members were using us exclusively. Others of them had their primary care doctor, their endocrinologist, who they had a long-standing, trusting relationship with. So we said, of course you should stay with them. And we're here to help and supplement and to be able to bring added value. And I think that the idea of being there constantly, 24/7, 365, adds value to the primary care, because now people know, okay, you're not just there 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. You or someone from your team is available to take care of me all the time.
Yeah, that's crazy. I used to have an accountant, God rest his soul, Harold Silverman. And so he used to say back in the day, Citibank was all over with an advertisement, the city never sleeps.
Yes.
And he said his line was, why would you want to bank with insomniacs?
Right.
So it's pretty funny that we're living in a day and age where you really can have access to medical care at your fingertips. And what would you say to a healthcare consultant like me who builds health plans, who I believe that it's important to have telemedicine as part of any program that we put together? I think it's just silly not to.
Sure.
And in my experience, it's not cost prohibitive. Maybe you could touch on that as well, on what the cost of the program is. But what do you think is the best way to look at it and approach it? So if we have a head of HR that might be listening, or a CFO that's involved in healthcare, because it's now such a huge line item on the budget, they're historically more involved than they've ever been. What would you say to those folks? What is the best way to look at integrating MediOrbis with their current strategy?
So the first thing we always ask is, tell me about what you're doing. Tell me about your membership. Tell me about your values. Tell me about your vision, because that's the most important thing. I'm not here to throw things at you and try to put a round peg in a square hole. Quite the opposite. I want to understand what you're looking to accomplish, what you're looking to achieve, and bring the different parts of our program together that can help you achieve that. It could be something as simple as 24/7 acute care, urgent care. That's all I need. That's what this population needs. No problem. We can do that. It could be much broader, much more comprehensive. This is a population that doesn't have access to traditional primary care, and we want them to have access to diabetes management and weight loss and behavioral health. We can certainly provide that as well. We're there to be able to provide the type of clinical services that the members and population need. We have a variety of different pricing schedules based on the different services, based on the different population, based on the region, based on the location. And all of those are there to be able to be a solution and a partner to the clients that we work with. Again, I'm not here to just throw stuff at you and hope you pick one of them. Quite the opposite. We like building meaningful relationships with our clients, and that'll only happen if you're providing a valuable service for them. And we've done some interesting work. I know people don't like talking about the gatekeeper in healthcare, but we've served as a telehealth gatekeeper, right? Call the telemedicine provider before you go to an in-person provider. And someone once called our service, and they were in an accident mowing their lawn. They were bleeding profusely, and they were in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. And I said, why are you calling? He said, well, if I don't call you, I'm not going to get reimbursed.
Oh, God.
So that's, of course, the
Right.
downside to the gatekeeper.
Right.
setup. It's like, go back to the ambulance, go get your care. But again, it's not one size fits all. It's just being able to try to provide a solution and a service for membership and clients who are going to benefit from it.
How do you stack up against competitors price-wise?
No, I'm much better.
That's a good answer.
I think, again, because we're a clinical team, we're not driven by some of the other financial considerations and pressures that a lot of other companies have. So we're able to get to a much more reasonable place for most of our clients. We're a physician-driven company, and we don't have a million investors that we have to satisfy. We don't have these crazy financial forecasts and revenue projections that we have to get to in order to continue to operate. And so our primary focus is being able to provide a good solution to our clients in a manner that they can afford it and they can appreciate it.
And so when did you go live?
We've been around since 2018.
Oh, wow.
So initially we were just a physician service. So again, I'm just a stupid doctor. So I thought, well, I staff hospitals, I staff ICUs, I'll staff telemedicine. And we served as the back end to using other companies' developed technology and digital health solutions, and realized they were terrible and we didn't like them. And so that's when I partnered with my current partner, and we said, hey, let's build the infrastructure, let's construct the platform that we need and that we want, and then went out to the market. Again, we didn't raise hundreds of millions of dollars, so we don't sponsor every conference and we don't have huge fancy booths at every show. But
yeah,
I think what I've been very pleased to find is that people in all different areas of the healthcare ecosystem, from the self-insured to the mini med and discount med plans, to the MA space and Medicaid, Medicare space, people are looking for good solutions, good clinical programs, and good partners. And so as someone, I had no access to the healthcare economics when I was in training. All we knew about financial back end of healthcare was you billed for certain procedures and sometimes you got paid. That was all we knew. And now I understand that there's a whole world out there. There's fully insured, there's partially insured, there's level funded, there's brokers, there's TPAs, there's benefits providers, there's the whole array. My eyes have been opened to what is on the back end of that bill that gets paid.
Oh, you bet.
And it's been a great journey, and I'm very fortunate to have gone down it. And again, I think that the reception that we've had has been very positive because we do come from such a different place than a lot of the other players in the market.
I'd imagine language is not a barrier either, right? Because you are virtual. What comes to mind is recently finished up a consulting project for a mid-market company. They had about 500, 600 lives. That was pretty much the ballpark. But a lot of these folks, they're a company that's based in Texas, and a lot of their folks were Spanish speaking from Mexico. They just put their head down, went to work. Yes, it was important for them to have health insurance, but their utilization was not great in the sense that if they needed care, they would typically go to the ER.
Right.
And that, of course, is no bueno if you're trying to control healthcare costs.
Sure.
It's going to be your most costly access point. I could see something like this working very well for an organization like that, particularly if the experience is good. And speaking of the experience, I don't know if you get into net promoter scores and stuff like that, but what is the feedback? You've been around for a while. So how do people like it?
So thank God we've been very fortunate to be able to provide services in a variety of different regions and even countries. So we have a global platform. We have provider networks all over the world to be able to serve those international memberships. We have translator services. We have Spanish-speaking physicians. And again, it's really a question about meeting members and meeting patients where they are, trying to provide a very diverse experience so that you can appeal to a very diverse population. And thank God we've been very fortunate to have great NPS scores over the course of our time. Our metrics are outstanding, and we go toe to toe with any company that's out there, if not beat them, under 5-minute acceptance time, NPS of 85, 86, and great resolution rates, 98, 99%. And again, it speaks to the outstanding caliber of physicians that we have working on our network.
Wonderful. That's awesome. So it brings me to a hot button topic, and one that's near and dear to my heart, which is what's broken in healthcare. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to watch the Senate committee hearing that Senator Johnson put together with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Dr. Marty McCary, and just an incredible panel of experts. Did you happen to catch that?
No, but we heard Dr. McCary together in DC.
We did. We were at Rosetta Fest and heard Dr. McCary talk a little bit about that. I guess it was just that week that committee hearing went down. And it led me to, I'm about halfway through Dr. Casey Means' book with her brother Callie Means on just what's wrong with healthcare. And it's interesting to have your perspective, being that you spend a good chunk of your time in Israel versus here in the US. But Dr. Means' contention is that our food policy and our food supply in the US, because it's regulated, quote unquote, but not regulated for the people, which is something that I hope changes.
Yeah.
And that we are eating ultra processed foods, that this is really the smoking gun that is feeding the disease epidemic here in the US, because we spend far more than any other country on planet Earth on healthcare, and yet we're amongst the sickest.
Right.
And so I think we're good examples. You're considerably younger than I, but you look phenomenal. Your height-weight ratio seems to be blueprint. I do a lot of things poorly.
That's not the weight said over.
My diet is not bad. My exercise routine is not bad. I'll call myself out. I drink too much, which is something I really have to get a handle on. And I am somewhat addicted to food, but it's not, for me personally, it's not so much the ultra processed foods that it is, but I do think about the fact that even if you believe you're eating healthy and you're eating fruits and vegetables, unless you're eating certified non-GMO organic, that stuff is killing the bugs that land on them, on the plants. What do you think it's doing to your gut biome?
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated about your opinion. You are a brilliant guy, and obviously this is your field. Do you see a correlation there? And where do you think we're headed?
So first of all, I think that these books are essential because they help you think about things that are out there and explore topics. Like I mentioned before, I'm fascinated by just learning and understanding. In healthcare and in clinical medicine, it's all driven by data, or should be. And I always joke that one of my mentors used to say, if someone says, in my experience, just assume they've seen it once. And his point was, if you haven't done a large randomized prospective control trial, you don't really know if something that you're doing is evidence-based or not. And then even if you do a large randomized prospective randomized control trial, maybe it's influenced by the pharmaceutical company, or maybe the PI on the study didn't.
Bravo. You can't take it as Bible.
Right, exactly. And it's very important to read everything critically and to be able to know the back end and the history and dive deeply into each and every one of these topics and each and every one of these subjects. I tell people in the hospital all the time when I'm working with residents and trainees, don't take anything I say at face value. Look into it. Make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. Make sure that you hold me accountable. And everyone has their own vested interests in the world at large. Everyone talks about the broken healthcare system, vested interests, and people get very worked up. But that's just the way the world works, right? That's capitalism. Capitalism is that you have a company that's trying to make as much money as they can, and you as the consumer have to decide whether you're going to buy their product or not. And if you're smart enough to look into it and understand that their product is not really in your best interest, you won't do it. I think it's the same thing in health insurance. I think it's the same thing in clinical medicine. Dr. McCary talks about breast screening for breast cancer, mammograms, and he talks about hormone replacement therapy and some of the dogma behind it without necessarily having great clinical data. And he's 100% right that you need to investigate each and every topic. And food and health is the same thing. I strongly shy away from ultra processed things. I personally am gluten-free, even though I used to make fun of gluten-free people. But I think that ultra processed flour just doesn't seem natural. And
doesn't seem natural.
Doesn't seem to me to be the thing we should be pounding. There's preservatives in so many packaged things that we eat that it can't be healthy. I tell my kids all the time, we went a winery, we picked grapes and we made grape juice, and we left and they said, you have 2 days to drink this grape juice before it goes bad. You've bought fish before, right?
Of course.
How many days do you have before it goes bad?
Eat it the same day.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you buy tuna fish that's been on the shelf for years.
Right. Right.
So you have to have a little bit of common sense in understanding the tuna fish companies are trying to sell tuna fish, and the grape juice company that has grape juice on the shelf is trying to sell grape juice. And you as a consumer in a capitalistic society have the choice as to what to buy. You as a healthcare consumer have the choice into what plan you can buy and what's in your best interest. I don't get worked up the same way some people do at these conferences,
Right.
because that's the world that we live in. You can deny it and you can kick and scream and get very upset, or you could just try to find solutions and say, listen,
Right.
they're doing what they're supposed to do. Now, I'm never going to get behind anyone misleading individuals, lying, deceiving, hiding data, not even.
You better get the hell out of the
Yeah,
US.
that I can't get behind.
Yeah.
But a drug company trying to sell their medication,
Right.
that's what they're trying to do.
Right.
Again, assuming there's nothing mischievous or deceptive.
No,
going on.
I get that. But here's my issue. If you watch the Senate committee hearing and you have one of the panelists, I forget who she was. I think she actually goes by the food babe.
Mhm.
She was out there and she held up a bag of Trick cereal that was made in the US for USA consumption, and a bag that was made for Canada. And the one that she held up that was made for US consumption was like fireworks were going off.
Right.
It was vibrant, beautiful,
Yeah.
hues, reds, greens, yellows. And the one in comparison in Canada looked dismal.
Mhm.
And so I agree with you in that we should let freedom ring, right?
Mhm.
So these businesses, we can't expect them to do something for less profit. The mandate of any business is to create value for its shareholders. Period. End of story. I get that. But why do we allow over 10,000 different additives and ingredients in the American food supply when in Europe it's less than 400? And the trouble is that in and of itself is deceitful. The American people, until recently, and I'm in kind of the healthcare space now, arguably, on the insurance and the finance side, albeit, but I do this every day. It really wasn't like, there wasn't a smoking gun until I saw that. And I was just like, holy shit, like
Right.
it's ridiculous. And then the implications of what's going on in our gut biome. And just to backtrack a little bit, Dr. McCary, if you read his book, Blind Spots, he talks about the benefits of HRT. And there was there was some obscure study that said that the incidence of breast cancer were markedly increased when taking estrogen. And that study, like, yes, let's just call it what it is, for profit, for greed, a lot of money was poured into this. The academic consensus was, yes, stop taking estrogen, to the detriment of millions of American women who otherwise would have benefited from it. And that stuff I call criminal.
Mhm.
So I think in one aspect, yes, you must say we are for freedom and you do have a choice. And in your case, you're not putting gluten into your body because that it's not good for you. Yeah, I think we need to do more of that as a nation without trying to get on my high horse or stand on a bully pulpit. I just think that we need better information, and we need to understand that this stuff is killing us.
Sure.
And it is feeding the disease and so many of the comorbidities that we're seeing in the healthcare system. You're not seeing that, I would imagine, in Israel to the same extent that you are here.
So growing up, we never had soda in my house, zero, which to my parents' credit was not the popular decision.
I grew up with Pepsis.
And I still to this day,
Yeah,
no soda in our house. We drank orange juice.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, great. And then I read an article how they make orange juice. I thought, growing up, it's natural. It's not natural. There's nothing close to natural.
Right.
So again, I definitely believe if you have regulatory bodies, they should be making things well known to the public. And there's always, again, when you're dealing with with population health, you always have to balance many different competing interests. It's not all that the food companies are evil and the government is trying to save us from it. Having preservatives allows food to last for longer. It increases the supply chain. It allows us to store food for much. It's not all just terrible. And so that's why I think it's so important for everyone to read and study books like this, to study topics like this, to really plumb the depths of all the different issues so that they could get the best understanding themselves, make the decisions for themselves that makes the most sense. I don't trust anyone. I have an incredulity towards meta narratives. And again, remember a book I read in high school, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. In the 20s and 30s, kids were dropping dead left and right because of bacteria that they were getting from canned meat. Thank God we're not there.
Right.
So it's not all gloom and doom. And I 100% agree with you that there's a lot of work to do. A lot of it lies on the shoulders of people to educate themselves. And I would agree with you that it's probably a good idea for the government to help us out a little bit in some of these things also.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt. So what do you see then moving forward? What is the market opportunity? Your partner's an MBA, NYU Stern School graduate. Shout out to NYU. What does he think in terms of market opportunity, and how big a business could this be? Dream with me for a minute.
Yeah, well, like I said, we don't have these targets of $1 trillion or anything really expansive other than being able to provide outstanding service. And we're very fortunate to be in a space where I think people are tiring of like standard, non-particularly exciting, non-creative options that are there in the market. Thank God we've bonded not just over our love of New York and the Rangers, but also our desire to bring innovative healthcare solutions to people in a way that other companies are not at this point in time. And I think that the small, mid, even large market in the self-insured employer space, in the health plan space, in Medicare and Medicare Advantage is seeing such a shift from where we were 10, 15 years ago, that people are looking for innovative, creative solutions. People are looking for healthcare providers to be able to do things a little bit different and a little bit better than what they're used to. And we're very excited about the opportunities that lie ahead of us because we're doing things that are different. We're providing care in such a broad way. We're providing such an outstanding clinical expertise in so many different areas for the populations that we work with that I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, you should be. You're doing good in the world. Honestly, I mean, it is remarkable that we're living in a day and age where if you have a telephone or an internet connection, you could get a hell of a lot done. And
Yeah.
I mean, think about people that just don't have the luxury of being able to hop in a car and going and seeing a doctor if they do need care, and being able to call someone and get good, solid medical advice on the other end of the phone. Some of these people would just end up not having care at all. And that's not a great option.
Right. Well, as we sort of wrap up, I'll mention a mentor of mine and one of the smartest people I know, Dr. Steve Osterly. He was the former chief medical officer of Medtronic, and he went from interventional cardiology to the world of investment and venture capital and healthcare economics. And so I said to him once, do you miss clinical medicine? He said, yes, I miss clinical medicine. But I think to myself, if I did 3 or 4 cardiac caths a day, I saved fill in the blank, however many number of patients, I'd be able to get to a certain concrete number every single year of people who I saved. If I bring one cardiac device to the market, I could save millions of people with one device. And so I love clinical medicine. I can't see myself giving it up. I love teaching and I love helping and I love participating in patients' care. And at the same time, I also have that voice saying, listen, you bring one employer group, you bring one population group, you can help thousands of people in one shot. And I think that's a very powerful message as well.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Well, hey, I can't thank you enough for being here. You're an amazing guest. If folks want to reach out, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Well, I always joke that I respond to smoke signals and the carrier pigeons before I respond to LinkedIn messages. So
Right.
that's not going to happen, but MediOrbis.com. And I'd love to learn more about the interesting things that people are up to, in interesting solutions that are out in the market, and see if there's a way that we can help.
And for the MediOrbis interested, do you work directly with Taft-Hartley plans, or do you primarily go through TPAs or brokers, or all the above?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, man. Rangers won last night. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but Rangers kicked the shit out of the Islanders last night. And
first of many this season, please God.
Yeah, look at the smile on his face. You can't deny that. So go New York Rangers. And Doc, Hey, really appreciate you being here. First studio guest ever.
There you go, the maiden voyage. All right. Well, thanks for having me, Ray. It was really great conversation. Fascinating as always, littered with New York bravado and Rangers cheering. So couldn't get better.
Right on. All right, folks. Thank you all for joining. Until the next one, peace and love. Peace and love. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Thanks, Ray.
So that's it for today's episode of Broken Healthcare. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week who posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $15,000 value private VIP day with Ray Kober himself. Be sure to head on over to brokenhealthcarepodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Ray's gift and join us on the next episode.